told you black people needed white America to survive. They said we couldn't build it, couldn't run it, couldn't sustain it on our own. That was the story. That was always the story. But deep in the Mississippi Delta, in a place carved out of swampland by the bare hands of formerly enslaved people, a town proved every single word of that lie wrong. And when it did, the system came for it. Mound Bayou, Mississippi. At its peak, this town owned everything inside its borders: the bank, the hospital, the cotton gins, the railroad depot, the newspaper, the schools, every business, every dollar, every decision, black. And the most powerful men in America, from Booker T. Washington to a sitting president of the United States, came to see it with their own eyes. The system could not tolerate a working proof that black people did not need white America at all. So it moved to destroy what it could not defeat. But the full story of how they did it and why they had to is what they never wanted you to know. Let's go back to the beginning. Not the polished beginning, the real one. It is spring 1887. Two men stand at the edge of a swamp in Bolivar County, Mississippi. The land is wild. The heat is thick. There are no roads, no buildings, no nothing. Just trees, water, and mud as far as you can see. These two men, Isaiah T. Montgomery and his cousin, Benjamin T. Green, were both born enslaved on the same plantation. They know what it means to have nothing and to build anyway. So they buy 840 acres of this wilderness from a railroad company. The price is around $7 an acre, and they start clearing. Isaiah was no ordinary man. As a child, he had been taken from the fields and made to serve as a cabin boy for Union Admiral David D. Porter during the Civil War. He learned to read. He learned to navigate power. He watched how the world worked from the inside, and he never forgot a single lesson. There is also a third founding figure worth knowing, Joshua P.T. Montgomery, who came with Isaiah and Benjamin from Davis Bend and helped break that first ground. History has mostly forgotten Joshua. That is a pattern we will keep seeing. The first 12 settlers arrived from Davis Bend, where Isaiah and Benjamin's family had once managed an entire plantation operation while enslaved. These were not broken people. They were skilled, experienced, and determined. Within months, they have cleared fields. Within years, they have built a school, a church, a post office, and the word spreads. Black families from across Mississippi come. They build, they stay, they buy land. By the turn of the century, Mound Bayou is something America had never officially admitted could exist. A self-governing, entirely black town. No white bosses, no white landlords, no white sheriffs. Just black citizens running their own lives, on their own land, by their own rules. And they were winning. Then came Charles Banks, and this is where Mound Bayou stopped being impressive and started being dangerous. Banks was born in Clarksdale, Mississippi in 1873, the son of formerly enslaved parents. In 1900, he attended the very first National Negro Business League meeting in Boston, where Booker T. Washington called the room to action. Banks did not just listen, he moved. By 1903, he had relocated to Mound Bayou, and 1 year later, in 1904, he and Eugene P. Booz opened the Bank of Mound Bayou, one of the first black-owned banks in the entire state of Mississippi. Think about what that meant in 1904 Mississippi. Black people had a bank, their own bank, and the moment it opened, white-owned banks in the surrounding area had to actually compete for black customers. They had to lower interest rates. They had to treat black farmers with a measure of respect. Because black people now had somewhere else to go. That is economic power. That is what a bank does when black people own it. And Booker T. Washington, the most prominent black leader in the country at the time, looked at Charles Banks and called him the most influential Negro businessman in the United States. By 1907, Mound Bayou had 13 stores, 3 cotton gins, a sawmill, churches, schools, a newspaper called The Demonstrator. The bank was growing. Families were prospering. Cotton production hit 5,000 bales in 1908. The same year, President Theodore Roosevelt ordered his train to make a special stop in Mound Bayou so he could see it for himself. And this is where you need to hold this picture in your mind, because we are going to come back to it. Because what they built in that swamp was not just impressive, it was a threat. And somewhere, Powerful people were already watching. Hold that thought for a second. Hey family, real talk. YouTube has shut down channels for telling exactly these kinds of stories, so I need you to find us off this platform. Go to blackstories-untold.com, join our mailing list, and make sure we stay connected no matter what they do. Now, back to what happened next. In 1907, Charles Banks stood up at a National Negro Business League meeting and announced his most ambitious project yet, a cottonseed oil mill, fully black-owned, the only one of its kind in the entire United States. He sold shares to local black families at $1 each. Ordinary people, farmers, workers, everybody bought in. The mill was capitalized at $100,000, and when it finally opened in November of 1912, Booker T. Washington gave the keynote address to a crowd of roughly 15,000 people. Washington called it the largest thing of the kind ever undertaken by Negro people, and he was right. Julius Rosenwald, the president of Sears, Roebuck and Company, purchased $25,000 in bonds to support it. The whole country was watching Mound Bayou, but the full picture of what was already happening behind the scenes is even bigger than the celebration. Because while thousands cheered the oil mill opening, a white Memphis cotton broker named Benjamin B. Harvey had quietly moved in. Harvey had leased the mill, and Harvey was already planning to destroy it. He reneged on his contract. He stole money from the operation. The court battle that followed crippled the mill before it could ever reach its potential. And when the cotton price crashed in 1911, the Bank of Mound Bayou was already strained. By 1914, state regulators moved in and shut it down. Charles Banks believed the bank had enough assets to survive. It didn't matter. The decision was made above his head. Here is what happened the moment that bank door closed. White-owned banks in surrounding areas immediately raised interest rates on black farmers. They required black farmers to use white-owned cotton gins instead of the black-owned ones in Mound Bayou. They used the power vacuum like a weapon. Every door that Mound Bayou had opened for black economic independence, they slammed shut the second they got the chance. This was not coincidence. This was the playbook, and this is where everything connects. Because what happened to Mound Bayou was not a string of bad luck. It was a system doing exactly what it was designed to do: deny credit, control the market, wait for vulnerability, then extract. Banks tried to fight back. In 1915, he opened a second bank, the Mound Bayou State Bank. He established a loan company specifically designed to stop white ownership from penetrating the town's land. But the damage was compounding. In November 1915, Booker T. Washington died, and Mound Bayou lost the most powerful national advocate it had. The town was now fighting alone. The Great Migration pulled working-age families north toward factory jobs and a chance to breathe. The cotton market crashed again after World War I. By 1920, most of the black families who had owned land in Mound Bayou were now landless sharecroppers, men who had owned property, men whose fathers had built this town with their hands, now working land they did not own for wages they could not control. The system had come full circle. And in 1923, Charles Banks, the man who had built the bank, built the oil mill, and fought every step of the way, died of food poisoning in Memphis. He was 50 years old. But here is what they really hoped you would not find out. Mound Bayou did not die. It came back. In 1942, a doctor named Theodore Roosevelt Mason Howard arrived in Mound Bayou to run a brand new hospital, the Taborian Hospital, operated by the International Order of 12 Knights and Daughters of Tabor. The hospital had 42 beds, 2 operating rooms, an X-ray room, a blood bank, and a lab. Black families across the Delta could join on a subscription plan for roughly $8.40 a year. Some historians have called it the first health maintenance organization in America. Think about that. Black people in Mississippi, the most terrorized, most deliberately impoverished black community in the country, created a model for organized healthcare that the entire nation would eventually adopt. TRM Howard did not stop there. He built a 1,000-acre plantation, a home construction business, a restaurant, and the first swimming pool in Mississippi that black people were allowed to use. In 1951, he founded the Regional Council of Negro Leadership, the RCNL, right there in Mound Bayou, Mississippi's most important civil rights organization of the early 1950s. The RCNL organized a boycott against gas stations that denied Black people access to restrooms. They printed and distributed at least 20,000 bumper stickers. Their annual rallies in Mound Bayou pulled up to 10,000 people. Thurgood Marshall spoke from that stage. Mahalia Jackson sang. And one of the young men Howard brought to Mound Bayou to work as an insurance agent? Medgar Evers. Howard looked at Evers and saw a soldier. He mentored him, organized with him, and pointed him directly toward the civil rights movement. Medgar Evers would go on to become the NAACP's first field secretary in Mississippi. He was shaped, in large part, right here in Mound Bayou. Then, in August 1955, Emmett Till was killed. And when the world needed a safe place to gather evidence, coordinate journalists, and protect witnesses, they came to TRM Howard's home in Mound Bayou. His house became the command center for the entire investigation. Mamie Till Mobley, Emmett's mother, was there. NAACP attorneys were there. The reporters who told that story to the world were there. Mound Bayou was once again the most important Black town in America. And the system noticed. Death threats started coming for Howard, serious ones. In 1956, he sold most of what he had built in Mound Bayou and left for Chicago. His departure gutted the town's second rise. It was not a coincidence, it was pressure, applied until a man chose his life over his legacy. Then, the final act came slowly, the way these things always do. Desegregation opened the doors to white-owned businesses and gave Black consumers choices, which meant Mound Bayou lost its captive market. The farmers who had relied on Black-owned institutions now had access to integrated ones, which sounds like progress until you realize it slowly bled Mound Bayou of its economic foundation. And in the 1980s, the federal government under the Reagan administration cut the funding that had kept the town's health facilities running. The jobs disappeared. Over half the residents fell into dependence on government assistance. The last hospital in Mound Bayou closed in 1983. In 2018, John F. Kennedy Memorial High School was shut down by order of the Mississippi Supreme Court 2 days before the school year began. Residents fought it. They filed an injunction. They lost. Today, Mound Bayou has roughly 1,400 residents. The poverty rate is around 45%. There is a gas station, a convenience store, a funeral home. The town is still almost entirely Black. It still elects Black officials, and the ground it sits on is still listed on the National Register of Historic Places. But the institutions, the bank, the hospital, the oil mill, the school, are gone. Now here is what this whole story actually reveals. And pay attention, because this is bigger than one town. Mound Bayou was not destroyed because Black people made mistakes. Every community makes mistakes. Banks made risky decisions. Montgomery made a devastating political compromise at that 1890 convention, voting to strip over 130,000 Black voters from the rolls. A decision Frederick Douglass called treason, and history has never fully forgiven. These things are real. But look at what happened every single time the town showed strength. Banks raised rates. The state stepped in and closed a bank it had no business closing. A white broker stole the oil mill. The town's greatest leader was run out under the threat of death. Federal money got cut the moment the town needed it most. A school was closed 2 days before children were supposed to walk through the door. This town was not abandoned. It was systematically prevented from maintaining what it built. The method changed every decade. Violence, then economic strangulation, then the slow removal of every resource that allowed survival. Same result every time. Because the thing Mound Bayou proved, that Black people could build a complete, self-sufficient society without white permission, without white oversight, without white charity, was the one thing the system absolutely could not allow to stand as a working example. That is why you never learned about this place in school. Not because it failed, because it succeeded. And because the people who controlled what you were taught understood that if you knew what Black people built in a Mississippi swamp with nothing, you might start asking very uncomfortable questions about why everything they built kept getting taken. Isaiah Montgomery carved the town out of wilderness. Charles Banks built a bank that made white-owned banks compete. T.R.M. Howard built a hospital that the nation would later call a model for modern healthcare. Medgar Evers learned his purpose here. Emmett Till's story was protected here. And for one shining stretch of American history, there was a place in the Deep South where Black people answered to no one but themselves. That is the story of Mound Bayou. And now you know it. This was Black Stories Untold. And as always, thanks for watching. If you want more stories like this, click the video on your screen now.